Good evening and welcome to The Crucible, the program where contentious ideas are not merely discussed, but are rigorously tested in the fires of intellectual debate. Tonight, we confront a proposition that is as profound as it is polarizing: the complete and universal abolition of all national militaries. Is this the next logical step in our collective political evolution, a sign of humanity reaching for a more civilized future? Or is it a utopian fantasy, dangerously disconnected from the harsh realities of our world? To argue in favor of this motion, we have Dr. Kenji Tanaka, a distinguished professor of peace and conflict studies and a vocal proponent for global demilitarization. And to argue against, we are honored to host General Eva Rostova, a decorated military veteran and a highly respected geopolitical strategist, who will defend the necessity of armed forces. Our format will consist of opening statements, followed by a period of direct rebuttal and engagement, and concluding with concise closing arguments. Dr. Tanaka, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. I want to begin by asserting a fundamental, if controversial, truth. The very institution of the military is not, as we're so often told, a guarantor of peace. It is, in fact, the principal catalyst for global conflict, and represents a colossal misallocation of human potential and resources. Let us first consider the economic imperative. The world currently spends upwards of $2 trillion annually on military expenditures. This is a sum so vast, it becomes almost abstract, so let me contextualize it. The estimated cost to end extreme poverty is around $175 billion a year. The cost to provide clean water and sanitation for everyone on the planet is a fraction of that. We could fund renewable energy transitions, eradicate malaria and tuberculosis, and ensure universal education, all with the money we currently spend on weapons. This is the so-called peace dividend we are squandering. We are actively choosing to fund the mechanisms of our own destruction, at the direct expense of our collective survival and well-being. It is an economic and moral failure of historic proportions. Beyond the economics, we must understand the inherent paradox of military deterrence, often termed the security dilemma. When one nation builds up its military for what it claims are purely defensive purposes, its neighbors do not perceive it as a benign act. They see a potential threat, and so they respond by increasing their own military strength. This, in turn, is seen as a provocation by the First Nation, sparking a perpetual, self-reinforcing cycle of arms races. This doesn't create stability, it institutionalizes suspicion and systematically escalates tensions, making eventual conflict more, not less, likely. Finally, abolishing the military is a necessary paradigm shift for human maturity. Just as enlightened societies evolved beyond primitive forms of dispute resolution, like trial by combat, the international community must now evolve beyond the barbaric spectacle of trial by war. It is the only way to break from the destructive cycles of the past and begin to collaboratively address the truly existential threats of our time, like climate change and pandemics, which recognize no borders and cannot be defeated with tanks or missiles.
Thank you, Dr. Tanaka. General Rostova, your opening statement, please.
Thank you. Dr. Tanaka's vision is an eloquent and noble one. It is also, I must respectfully submit, a profoundly dangerous and naive proposition that is utterly irreconcilable with the unchangeable realities of international politics and, dare I say, human nature. Let us begin with the first and most solemn duty of any nation-state: the protection of its sovereignty and the safety of its citizens. A credible, well-equipped military is the ultimate deterrent against foreign aggression, coercion, and invasion. It is the bedrock upon which national security is built. A disarmed nation in a world that still contains those willing to use violence is not a moral exemplar, it is a target. History is not a gentle teacher on this matter. It is a brutal instructor, and its lessons are written in the blood of the defenseless. Time and again, from ancient history to the 20th century, we have seen that weakness invites aggression. Furthermore, the entire argument for abolition rests on the fatally flawed assumption of universal goodwill and compliance. It imagines a world where every state, every leader, and every political faction will peacefully lay down their arms. But what is the proposed solution for dealing with those who will not? How would this demilitarized utopia contend with a rogue state that secretly rearms? How would it defend itself against violent non-state actors, sophisticated terrorist networks, transnational criminal organizations, or extremist militias, who would undoubtedly exploit the resulting power vacuum? For power vacuums are never filled with peace and cooperation. They are filled by the most ruthless and the most violent. Finally, the argument conveniently ignores the multifaceted role of modern militaries. They are not exclusively warfighting institutions. In many nations, they are the only organization with the logistical capability, the disciplined manpower, and the rapid response infrastructure to manage large-scale natural disasters. They conduct complex humanitarian aid missions in failed states, secure vital sea and air lanes that are the arteries of the global economy, and engage in demining and peacekeeping operations. To abolish them is to leave a critical void in our ability to respond to national and international emergencies. In short, to disarm is to willfully make ourselves vulnerable, not just to our enemies, but to chaos itself.
We now move to the rebuttal portion of our debate. Dr. Tanaka, you have the opportunity to respond to General Rostova's points.
The general's argument for deterrence, this doctrine of peace through strength, is precisely the ideology that gave us the Cold War. It led the world's superpowers to the precipice of nuclear annihilation and fueled dozens of horrific proxy wars that claimed millions of lives, all while being justified in the name of stability. This is not peace. It is a prolonged, high-stakes standoff with a loaded gun. True, lasting security does not come from a balance of terror. It comes from mutual trust, economic interdependence, and shared legal frameworks, the very things that militarism undermines. As for the intractable problem of bad actors, the general is correct that we cannot simply wish them away. My proposal is not for unilateral, trusting disarmament into a void. It is for a radical but necessary alternative. The systematic dissolution of asterisk national armies in favor of a vastly expanded, reformed, and democratically controlled international peacekeeping and crisis response force. This is not the absence of an armed response capability. It is the transference of that capability from the hands of self-interested nation-states to a global body accountable to all. Such a force, funded by a fraction of the peace dividend I mentioned earlier, would be the entity to intervene against rogue states or transnational threats. But it would do so under the banner of international law, not national ambition. And her point about the humanitarian role of militaries, I see this as an inefficient secondary function. Specialized, civilian-led agencies like the Red Cross or Doctors Without Borders could perform these roles far more effectively, and without the inherent political baggage and military footprint that so often complicates and compromises genuine humanitarian missions. We simply need to fund them appropriately, which becomes easy in a post-military world.
General Rostova, your rebuttal.
Dr. Tanaka's solution of a global police force is a well-trodden utopian fantasy, and it is, frankly, even more terrifying than the world we have now. He speaks of democratic control, but what does that truly mean? Who would command this force? A committee? Who decides when and where to intervene? It would inevitably become a tool for the most powerful nations on its governing council to impose their will upon the weaker ones, creating a new and unassailable form of global tyranny. It solves the problem of national interest by replacing it with a far more dangerous global hegemon, all while stripping nations of the very essence of sovereignty, the right to self-defense. This brings me to the insurmountable problem of verification and trust. How could any nation be absolutely certain that its historical adversaries have truly and completely disarmed? The potential for clandestine rearmament programs. hidden in secret underground facilities, would create an environment of profound and unbearable paranoia. Every industrial accident, every scientific breakthrough would be viewed through a lens of suspicion. This world would not be more stable. It would be a tinderbox of fear, where a single rumor could trigger a catastrophic preemptive strike by his global force. The proposal is fundamentally untenable, because it requires a level of absolute trust that has never existed, and will never exist, between competing states. Finally, the economic simplicity of his argument is breathtakingly naive. The global defense industry is not just a line item in a budget. It is a massive employer, and a primary driver of technological innovation that spills over into the civilian world. GPS, the internet, advanced composite materials, and countless medical technologies originated from military research. A precipitous, universal abolition would trigger a global economic depression, destroying the livelihoods of millions of skilled workers, engineers, and technicians overnight. The transition is not a simple matter of reallocating funds. It is an economic and social upheaval of unimaginable complexity.
We have reached the time for closing statements. You will each have a minute to summarize your position. General Rostova, you may begin.
A world without conflict is a goal we all sincerely share, but it cannot be achieved by wishing away the realities of human ambition, ideology, and competition. To dismantle our defenses in the unilateral hope that our adversaries will reciprocate in good faith is not a strategy, it is an act of abdication. It gambles with the lives of our citizens on the unproven premise of universal benevolence. Prudence, preparedness, and strength are not obstacles to peace. In an imperfect world, they remain its only reliable guarantors. The safety of future generations depends on our commitment to realism, not our surrender to a beautiful but dangerous idealism.
Thank you, General. Dr. Tanaka, your closing statement.
To continue down our current path of ever-escalating militarism is to accept a future of perpetual conflict, environmental degradation, and ever-present existential risk. The paradigms of the past have given us world wars, a Cold War, and endless regional conflicts. They have failed. The greatest risk, therefore, is not in trying a new and bold approach, but in fearfully clinging to the failed systems that have brought us to this precarious moment. Abolishing our national armies is the most courageous and most necessary investment we can possibly make in the future of humanity. It is time to choose cooperation over conflict, trust over terror, and life over the instruments of death.
And on that note, we must conclude. My sincere thanks to General Eva Rostova and Dr. Kenji Tanaka for their powerful and compelling arguments this evening. We are left at a crossroads between the world as it is and the world as we might wish it to be. The fundamental question remains for us all to consider. Is lasting peace a destination we can engineer and build, or a distant horizon we are destined to forever chase? Thank you for joining us on The Crucible.